What is up, weirdos? You're listening to the Manic Pixie Weirdo. I'm Abigail, your host, and this is the podcast where we talk about all the different kinds of relationships that we have in our lives. And this week, we are talking about my relationship with collective trauma. So first, I kind of wanted to just go ahead and give like a really general definition of what collective trauma is so everybody knows what I'm going to be kind of talking about. This definition comes from Frontiers in Psychology. It is a paper that was written by Gilead Hirschenberger, I believe is how you say that. I'm not 100% sure. Please don't crucify me for that. And it's called Collective Trauma and the Social Construction of Meaning. So I'm just going to read a little bit about like what this is from his abstract. Collective trauma is a cataclysmic event that shatters the basic fabrics of society. Aside from the horrific loss of life, collective trauma is also a crisis of meaning. The current paper systematically delineates the process that begins with a collective trauma, transforms into a collective memory, and culminates in a system of meaning that allows groups to redefine who they are and where they are going. So that's kind of the general idea of what collective trauma is. Now, there's many, many, many forms of collective trauma. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a huge event like the pandemic, for example. It could be something along the lines of a school shooting that shakes the fabric of the reality of the people who live in the town where a school shooting occurred. So something like Columbine, or really any school shooting that has happened here in the United States or anywhere around the world. It could also be something along the lines of like the apartheid in South Africa. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like one specific thing, or it doesn't necessarily have to be as big as, something like the pandemic. But I also want to talk about the flip side of collective trauma, which is sort of collective healing, which I think is really interesting because I think that there are various and sundry examples of when like you would have forms of collective healing. And that would be something like, a concert or a big like Marvel film release where there's a bunch of people that go and see it all at once. Something a big positive event, like something like that. I think that all of those things can contribute to collective healing. And I think that they're just sort of the flip side to that coin. Now, I don't know if that's actually true or not. That's just sort of like my thinking on it. So if you know that that's just systematically not true, by all means, please tell me. Let me know. manapixieweirdo@protonmail.com. Feel free to let me know because I've been wrong before. But collective trauma is so complex because it can also lead into things like systematic transgenerational trauma, which would be like an example of like the apartheid in South Africa. But I think throughout history we have had so much collective trauma just as a species, from religious persecutions, religious wars to, something like 9/11 or Columbine or even something as transgenerational and as systematic as racism and like something like slavery would be considered a version of collective trauma. And we just have so much collective trauma as a species that I think it can feel really overwhelming and really difficult at times to not be aware, but it can be very difficult at times to be like consciously aware of the systematic trauma that has lasted for so long. I mean, for thousands and thousands of years. And it can be really overwhelming, and it can be very daunting to think about, all of the different collective traumas that we have experienced as a species. It can be very difficult to talk about and to identify even, because there is so much of it. Just on a whole, there is so much of it. And I think it's something that we need to figure out how to address. Luckily, I have found, several podcasts where you can go and listen to episodes on how to heal collective trauma. And there's some really amazing people who are doing some really great work on collective trauma. So the first one is and I'll put all of this in the show notes. The Undark podcast, episode 50 is Studying and Surviving the Pandemic's Collective Trauma. That was a really good one. I really enjoyed it. It's also not very long, but it's a really good and very interesting and telling episode. Excuse me. So the next one is Healing Collective Trauma from the Art of Happiness with Arthur Brooks. That one's a little bit longer. It's about an hour and a half, but it's also really good. And it goes into some really interesting ideas and thoughts on like how to begin to heal collective trauma. I don't necessarily agree with everything that is said, or not even agree, but I don't necessarily like the way that some things are phrased, but I still think it's a really interesting episode to listen to from certain perspectives. So I would recommend it. And then the last one is A Gazillion and One, the podcast, A Gazillion and One. It's a bonus episode, The Collective Trauma of a Pandemic, and it's about an hour long, and it's pretty good too. So just kind of keep those in mind. Again, I will put all of that in the show notes so that you can go check those out as well. It's hard. Collective trauma is hard. And as somebody who, has experienced collective trauma, just alone through like something like 9/11 and the pandemic, I never really thought about it before. I really didn't. I honestly never really thought about it before, and how traumatic those events were. And I didn't even really realize how traumatic not just were, but are. It never really occurred to me. It just never really occurred to me what that can do. And so I think probably the first collectively traumatic experience that I was a part of was 9/11. It's one of those days where you remember exactly, it's almost, akin to the assassination of JFK here in the States. We, pretty much everybody knows where they were. They can recall where they were when they found out about the assassination of JFK, and when 9/11 happened. And I was in third grade. And when 9/11 happened, I was in third grade. And this was back in the day when we had those televisions that were mounted onto a cart that had wheels, and it would roll around from classroom to classroom. I don't know if they still have those, but that's how we used to find things out back in the day. And they were huge TVs. These were not like plasma TVs. These were like giant, like heavy things. But so I was in third grade, and I remember that we were in the middle of class. I don't remember what class it was. I think it was like math or something. And we rolled in the television, and I remember not really processing the information at first. I remember just being like, almost like it's a movie, like I'm watching a movie. I'm not watching something on the news that is like happening in real time. I remember being very disconnected and sort of disassociative um, of what was going on the screen, and really just sort of not understanding why everybody was so upset, because it was just a movie, kind of a thing. And I remember I'm pretty sure we got like the rest of the day off. Like they sent everybody home. Um, but, and then I don't really remember much after that. Like I remember seeing it, but I don't really remember like there being any sort of, like discussion about it really in my family. I could be completely wrong. It's entirely possible I'm just not remembering that we had a discussion about it. But I don't really remember talking about it all that much. And so I never really processed it, I guess, because it was just like it dawned on me later that no, in fact, yes, this was something real that happened. This was not a movie or a television show. This was something that actually happened. And I don't really remember when it was that I processed that information, like when I was finally able to process that information. To be honest, though, it didn't really hit me, the impact of it, until I read this book. I believe it's called Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close. I think that's the book I'm thinking of. Hold on. Extremely loud. I'm typing it into my phone to make sure. Yes, Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close. It is now a film, apparently. I never saw the movie. I just read the book, and yeah. So here's just like a little synopsis about it. Oscar Schell, 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 I believe. A 9-year-old boy has not been happy since his dad died in the 9/11 terrorist attacks. Unbeknownst to anyone except for Oscar, on the day of his attack, Oscar's dad called the house 5 times. Oscar was home for the 5th call but couldn't bring himself to pick up the phone. They never recovered his dad's body and buried an empty casket at his funeral. And it just goes on to like, it's his experience. And what that was like. I'm not 100% sure if it is. I believe it's a novel. I don't know if it actually happened, but I do remember during reading that book that was really the first time that it sort of hit me. It really sort of hit me that it was a domino, and the fact that it was a domino effect of, oh my gosh, all of these different things and events happened because of this one thing, and then the collective trauma around all of that and what that must have been like. And because I was pretty isolated in my own little bubble, in the middle of the United States. And so it wasn't like, it wasn't like this was in my face all the time, kind of a thing. So it was really only through like literature and films, documentaries, and things of that nature that I was really able to experience and begin to have an understanding of just how collectively we took this event and what it did and the repercussions of what happened. And I don't know if that's something that I have ever personally really dove into and really explored at all. I don't know if that was ever anything that I that I did, because it was almost like that, like I couldn't process it, because it was like that was over there. That happened to somebody else. It didn't happen to me. Only to get older and to find out all of the various and sundry, like I said, domino effects and things that began to take place after that did affect me because of what happened. And, now that I'm sitting here and really, I guess, for the first time ever really thinking about the collective trauma of it all, there's a lot of hurt. There's just a lot of pain involved. And I think that's what I don't understand about human beings in general, is why we continue to perpetuate a cycle and cycles of traumatic experiences. The intellectual, logical part of my brain says because, hurt people hurt people. To me, though, that sort of excuse / reason is long overdue. It doesn't really have the same effect on me as it used to, because it's like, yes, but this is systemic. This is something that has been happening for centuries, and it hasn't worked. And it's not working. We're not healing. We're not doing anything to help. And, well, it doesn't feel like we are. It doesn't feel like we're doing anything to help the situation. If anything, it feels like we are perpetuating the trauma by continuing to kick the can down the road and either sort of not acknowledge it. And as somebody who's the queen of not acknowledging things and sweeping it under the rug and then buying a bigger rug when the pile gets too big, it doesn't work. Doesn't work. It's so frustrating. It's so frustrating because it doesn't work. And I know it doesn't work because it didn't work for me in my own life. And it also hasn't worked for bunches and bunches and bunches and bunches and bunches of other people either. So I don't really understand why we're continuing to do it, because we have thousands of years of recorded history that shows that this is what we've been doing and it hasn't been working. And continuing to do the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity, isn't it? I mean, that sounds pretty insane to me. It really does. It sounds pretty insane to me to just continue to do this to one another and lash out in hurtful and harmful ways, not just to other people, but to ourselves as well. Because we don't treat ourselves very well. And if we don't treat ourselves well, then how the hell are we supposed to be able, or, much less be expected to treat other people well? I mean, now, obviously, an argument could be made. I can hear it now. The argument is that, certain people treat themselves well and then they're just assholes to everybody else. And that is true. That is 100% true. There are just those kinds of people in the world. I would argue a little bit, though. I would push back a little bit and say that there is something there, though. There's something there on a primal level that has not been addressed. That is some sort of... So epigenetic imprinting is the idea that when you are a baby in the womb, your ancestors can imprint certain traumas and things onto the baby while in the womb. And I do believe it's specific to the womb. So this would be like if something, if a woman is pregnant and in, let's say, an abusive situation, like a physically abusive situation, this could come back onto the baby, and the baby could have pre-existing trauma just through the mother being abused while pregnant. So things like that. That's a pretty extreme, obviously, version of what I'm talking about. But that's the basic idea. I believe as I understand the science to back this idea up. That's what I understand it to be. So again, don't quote me on that. Please go look it up for yourself. Fact check me. Do all the things, and let me know if I've completely missed the mark. Please let me know. But that idea makes sense to me. That idea makes sense to me that it would have an effect, and that's how you get transgenerational. Excuse me, English is hard. Transgenerational trauma, which you see in things like the systemic racism. And, for something like racism, that's a huge trauma that is rooted in so many different things that it's massive. And I keep using this word overwhelming, but it is. It's very overwhelming. And because of who I am as a person, I just want to make it better. I just want to know how do we make this better? Like, how do we make the hurt stop? That's what I want to know, is how do we make this hurt stop? And how do we begin to heal this stuff? Because with something like racism, it is so massive and it's so complex that it can feel like the weight of it is just crushing you. And because it's that big, and it truly is that big. And I just want to make that hurt stop. And I don't know how. And when I don't know how, that's a problem for me, because I'm not going to be okay until it's okay. And until everybody's okay. And I just know that about myself. I've always been that way. I don't really know why I'm that way. I just am. And it's not something that it's not a negative thing that I hold in my, in my world for myself. I hold that up as a positive thing. I like that about myself. Because it gives me the opportunity to learn how to help, and learn all the various and sundry ways to help. And so I do like that about myself. I think that it is a positive thing, not just in myself, but in other people as well. Because who am I kidding? I'm not the only one. There's no way I'm the only one. And I mean, the easy solution to start healing collective trauma and big, massive, transgenerational problems, yes, but trauma. The easy solution is we can send everybody just needs to go to therapy. And I definitely believe that, like, the whole planet just needs to go to therapy. We need a sesh, we need to take a time out, and the entire planet, just like, we need to all go hang out in a therapist's office. And, that's because that's the only solution that I really know of that would, that has helped lots and lots of people. The other thing too that I think contributes to the systematic problem and the cycle of collective trauma is the lack of communication. Is we are really bad at talking to each other. And I am no exception to this rule. I'm super bad at, trying to talk to other human beings. That's one of the reasons why I sort of, I only talk to people half the time, and the other half the time it's just me talking to myself, because I'm more comfortable talking and communicating to myself than I am with other people. And I'm working on it. I don't really know what that's about. But I do think that we're not very effective communicators. Like, from a species perspective, we're just not with each other, and most certainly not with other living, entities that, are around us at all times. But, there's no but. It just is. That's just what I think. I don't think that we're very good at effectively communicating not only what we want, but what we need. The flip side to that coin, though, is that, people have to be willing to listen. And I don't know if people are willing to listen, or if it's that, people will only hear you, they won't listen to you. Because there is a difference. I think that, well, I don't know. I don't have all the answers, you guys. I really don't. I'm just trying to, come up with, because I'm a solutions oriented person. Like, I get really frustrated when I feel like, people are just complain about the same problems and don't ever have any, solutions for the problems. And I definitely don't have solutions for all the problems or any of the problems at all. I just am I'm trying to figure out what those possible solutions could be. And I think that, to start with, I think one of the big ones is communication and trust, because we don't trust each other either. I don't know what that is, why we decided that not being able to trust each other when we decided that was a bad thing. And it's we've burned every bridge. Everybody has burned every bridge because they don't trust and they don't know how to effectively communicate. And that's where the breakdown comes in, and then the bridge gets burned, and then all of a sudden everybody's your enemy. And I don't want to live like that, you guys. I don't want to live like that. That's so bleak. That's so dull. And it's so lonely. And I don't want that for anyone. We're social creatures by nature. Human beings are the only species that, we need each other. We need each other really badly. That's how we're able to get things done effectively, efficiently, accurately. That's how we're able to to do it. And we don't trust each other. And I would suspect that a lot of that has to do with a lot of the collective trauma that has taken place, not just in this century, but all the centuries. I mean, geez, you guys. Wow. Like, we don't trust each other. And if you don't trust each other, if we don't trust each other, so like if I don't trust you, I start breaking down in like I don't, there becomes a breakdown in communication because I don't know how to effectively communicate what I'm trying to say because I begin to get defensive. Because I automatically don't, like that's what I do. When I don't trust somebody, I get, I get very defensive. I get very aggressive in, like with my words. I get very, and like my movements, I get very like, my hand waving of my arms. I will, like that kind of a thing. And is it because I feel threatened? Let's explore this a little bit. Is it because I feel threatened? No, it's not because I feel threatened. It's because I feel misunderstood. And I feel closed off. And I feel anxious. Why else do I do this? Because there's a lack of, not just because there's a lack of trust. What happens when there's a lack of trust? Yes, I get very defensive and and aggressive. Like I said, in like my movements and my, my tone will go up and things of that nature. And I don't think that's unique. It can't be. But let's just say for the sake of argument that that's what we're doing as a species because we don't trust each other and we don't know how, and therefore we don't know how to effectively communicate with one another. We become defensive or aggressive. We become big, mean, and scary, or try to become big, mean, and scary. Some of us do. Other responses include, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, etc. Yeah. And why? And yes, I think that's another reason why we continue to perpetuate this like systemic trauma that seems to just be baked in to being a human being. We feel different. And nobody likes to feel different because it feels weird. It feels off. It feels isolating. And because human beings are social creatures, we don't like this feeling. We also don't like the feeling of change. We're not good. This would translate, as we're not good with change. Because it feels threatening. And we don't like that. And we're not, I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's a natural response. I think it is a human response. I think it is I think it is okay to feel those things. Where it becomes a problem is when you begin to bring it into, a world with consequences, where your actions actually do matter and the things that you say do matter. Because you can't just go around hurting people because, it feels good. It makes you feel better. You can't just go around hurting people because it makes you feel better. That's not okay. That's where it becomes not okay. For me, at least. For me, that's where it becomes not okay. And that's so, that in itself, how is that not traumatizing? How is that in and of itself, just that feeling of, panic, isolation, depression, the anxiety of it. How is that not traumatic in and of itself? Especially if you don't know why. I mean, especially if you don't know why. Like, how is that not also traumatic in and of itself? Like, just its own traumatic experience. That's overwhelming. It's honest, though. That's what I honestly feel and think. It's very difficult because we go to these places and we feel these things, and it can be hard to get out. It can be really hard to get out, but that's where like community comes into play. And that's where, you sharing, I think, is a big key to how we begin to heal this, is to share and to talk about it and to communicate with one another and say, hey, I'm not okay. And I don't even know why I'm not okay. I just know that I'm not really okay. I think that, but that's real scary. That in and of itself is really scary. Because especially if you're like me, who I want to feel like I like, that's just like an unacceptable answer in my world, It's like, well, what do you mean you don't know? That's what a child says. I would argue, like I've said before, that we as a collective species are probably only somewhere about 5 or 6 years old. So we only know how to effectively communicate as well as a 5 or 6 year old. I would say on average, with that, whatever that average is, that's how well we're effectively able to communicate with one another on a continuous basis. I think I've absolutely zero evidence to prove any of what I'm saying is actually true. So take it with a grain of salt. That's just my thinking of it. So like, yeah, take it with a grain of salt. But if we're only about 5 or 6 years old, and therefore we can only communicate as effectively as a 5 or 6 year old with each other, we're still playing in the sandbox, kicking and screaming and crying, not understanding why all the other kids don't want to play with us. And an argument could also be made that, we're the kid in the sandbox who took everybody's toys, and now we don't understand why no one wants to play with us. Like, that's as effective as it gets. And I don't know how to fix that. I don't know. I don't know how we as a species begin to fix that. Because everybody needs the opportunity to heal, not just like, and what I mean by that is that like the therapists also need therapy in order to begin to heal this stuff. And the scientists need like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so even the people who need, who want to help and are willing to help, also need help as well. And I don't know how we do that other than by doing it together. And the problem with doing it together is that requires being able to trust our fellow, man, while trying to deal with the trauma of not being able to trust for so long, and being able to talk about it and be open and honest about all of these horrible things that have happened to us as a species, as a collective whole, and realizing that we did it to each other. I think that's another thing that we need. We did all of this stuff to each other. You know, it wasn't like somebody came down with a magic fairy wand and, made this happen. There was no cataclysmic, mind-bending event that happened where aliens came out of the sky and, perpetuated all of these things onto the human race. Like, these were things that we did to each other of our own volition. And we were very much consciously aware of what was happening while the trauma was taking place, or the abuse, excuse me. And then the trauma would be after, I believe that's the correct order that goes in. And I don't know. I'll have to think about that a little bit more. I really will. And we'll come back. We'll circle back to it at some point if I ever find an adequate answer that I like. I will definitely let y'all know. As of right now, December 4th, 2021, I don't have an answer for how we do that, other than be nice to each other. Other than that, it's just, and I'm not asking you to be gods, I'm not asking you to be like, Jesus Christ incarnate. I'm just talking about, just be a better person today than you were yesterday, or even 5 minutes ago. If you mess up, it's totally fine. We all messed up. Trust me. My life has been mostly errors up until this point. So it's okay. And to be nice to ourselves. Because we do have to start with our own internal healing before we can even begin to try to imagine, to tackle all the intricacies and the complexities of the collective trauma that we have experienced. I truly believe that if you're going to start somewhere, start with yourself, and explore those, and then work your way out, because it can be too overwhelming. At least for me, it can be way too overwhelming and too daunting of a task. And then you get real depressed, and it's just ineffective and inefficient, and it doesn't work. At least not for me. But, I'm a weirdo, and that's fine. It's possible that, it doesn't for some people. It just does for me. But that's the only real solution that I have, is to just be nicer to people. Just be nice to people. Just, if you see somebody in the store that, maybe you like their shoes, go up and tell them. It might be awkward, but you don't have to stay long. Just say something like, I really like your shoes, and then walk off. I do that all the time. Because I like a lot of different things, and so I do that all the time for various and sundry reasons. But you never know when you're going to make somebody's day. But if you're nice to people, you have a better shot of making their day than if you're mean to them. And I get it. Oh my God, I totally get it. It's hard. Because sometimes you just wanna strangle. Sometimes you just want to like shake people, and you're just like, I get it. It's really hard. It's really hard. But that's why, I have limited human contact because I'm a robot and I don't know how to do this. But no, I get it. It can be hard sometimes. I think that's sort of where the healing begins. Is we have to be able to trust each other, and we have to be able to learn how to more effectively communicate with one another. Not just what we want, but what we need and what would actually help. Like, what are the steps that can be taken to actually help so that we can begin to heal this stuff, And the flip side to that is we have to be willing to listen. We always have to be willing to listen with an open mind and an open heart, and be aware that we might not agree with everybody's way of healing. And that's where I just have to remind myself that my way is not perfect. My way is just my way, because my way works for me. And if it doesn't, and guess what? It doesn't have to work for everybody else because it works for me. And healing my way is the best way that I know how to heal myself. But that doesn't mean that that's the best way that I know how to heal other people. And that was a hard lesson for me to learn. Because like I said, I just want everybody to be okay. And I want everybody to be happy. And I want us all to stop hurting so much, because it does feel like the weight of the hurt can just be really overwhelming sometimes. But yeah, in conclusion, that's what I've got. So thank you guys so much for listening. I really love you guys so much. All my listeners, all of you guys. I am doing a giveaway this month, the month of December. It is a COVID vaccination card holder for your COVID ID. If you would like to enter to win, just email me at manicpixieweirdo@protonmail.com, or DM me on Twitter at @MPWeirdoPodcast, or the Instagram at _main_weirdo1, which is also the TikTok. You can reach out to me there too, if that's how you would like to enter. And then I will announce the winner at the end of the month. So I'm really excited to do that. I'm really excited to kind of give back a little bit to you guys. I love you so much. Thank you so much for listening. And as always, guys, be kind and stay weird. Love y'all. Bye.